Picture this: a Roman emperor fighting as a gladiator in the Colosseum, convinced he's the reincarnation of Hercules. Another emperor tries to make his horse a government official. And one poor guy gets assassinated while literally taking a bathroom break during a war campaign. Welcome to the wildest political story ever told, the complete saga of all 80 Roman emperors who ruled for over 500 years. We're talking about the ultimate mix of military genius and spectacular madness, family drama that makes reality TV look tame, and enough backstabbing to fuel 1,000 Netflix series. From Augustus, who built the greatest empire in history, to little Romulus Augustulus, who watched it all crumble. Each of these rulers shaped our world in ways we still feel today. So hit subscribe if you're ready for the craziest history lesson you've ever heard. And let's dive into 5 centuries of absolute power, absolute corruption, and absolutely unforgettable characters. This is the episode 4 of our long but definitely binge-worthy series on all 80 Roman emperors, where we explore the lives of emperors 31st to 40th. If you haven't watched the previous episodes on the first 30 Roman emperors, make sure you check it out in the pinned comment. Now let's dive into our stories, starting with Emperor 31st, the one with the Praetorian Guard resume, Philip the Arab. From power behind the throne to emperor himself, meet number 31, Philip the Arab. This provincial general ruled from 244 to 249 CE, rising from nowhere through court intrigue and military connections, while trying to restore imperial stability through spectacular celebrations and competent administration. Marcus Julius Philippus came from modern Jordan, making him another example of how the empire's leadership had become truly international rather than just Roman or Italian. He'd worked his way up to become Praetorian prefect under the teenage Gordian III, essentially running the empire while the kid learned on the job, until he decided to cut out the middleman and take direct control. His most memorable achievement was celebrating Rome's millennium in 248 CE with spectacular games and building projects that reminded citizens of imperial grandeur despite ongoing military pressures. These celebrations were partly genuine pride in Roman achievement and partly propaganda designed to convince people that the empire was still strong and unified despite decades of crisis. Philip also successfully managed multiple external threats: Germanic invasions across the Danube, Gothic raids in the Balkans, and renewed Persian attacks in the east. His reign represented competent crisis management by someone who understood that imperial survival required both military success and public confidence in government effectiveness. His downfall came when Decius, sent to suppress military mutinies on the Danube frontier, was proclaimed emperor by troops who decided they preferred their general to the distant emperor in Rome. The Battle of Verona in 249 CE ended Philip's attempt at stable governance, proving that even competent emperors couldn't survive when their own generals turned against them. Philip had shown that provincial talent could still provide effective imperial leadership, though his death demonstrated that systemic problems couldn't be solved by individual competence alone. His defeat would bring Decius to power, and that new emperor had some very specific ideas about what was wrong with Roman society. From reluctant military commander to persecutor emperor, meet number 32, Decius.
This conservative senator ruled from 249 to 251 CE, launching the first empire-wide Christian persecution, while facing barbarian invasions that would kill him and fundamentally change Rome's relationship with its enemies. Gaius Messius Quintus Decius was sent by Philip the Arab to deal with military mutinies on the Danube, only to find himself proclaimed emperor by troops who preferred his military experience to Philip's court politics. His elevation was allegedly reluctant. He supposedly didn't want the job, but he certainly accepted it once his soldiers made the decision for him. His most controversial policy was a systematic persecution of Christians throughout the empire, requiring all citizens to sacrifice to traditional Roman gods and get certificates proving their compliance. This wasn't just religious intolerance. Decius genuinely believed that Christian refusal to honor the gods was causing divine punishment in the form of military disasters and natural catastrophes. The military challenges were overwhelming. Massive Gothic confederations crossed the Danube in organized invasions, besieging cities and devastating entire provinces, while Roman armies struggled to respond effectively. These weren't just raids for loot. These were large-scale population movements by tribes being pushed west by other migrations further east. His death at the Battle of Abritus in 251 CE made him the first emperor killed in battle against foreign enemies, falling alongside his son Herennius Etruscus while fighting Gothic forces in swampland that favored the enemy. This defeat represented a new low point in Roman military prestige and a turning point in barbarian-Roman relations. Decius had tried to restore traditional Roman values through religious persecution and military aggression, but his death proved that individual imperial will couldn't overcome the empire's fundamental strategic vulnerabilities. The Goths had learned they could actually kill Roman emperors, which was information they definitely wouldn't forget.
Brief co-ruler in family tragedy, meet Emperor number 33, Herennius Etruscus. This young man co-ruled with his father Decius from 251 CE until their joint death later that year, becoming part of the first imperial father-son team to die together fighting foreign enemies. Quintus Herennius Etruscus Messius Decius was proclaimed Caesar and co-emperor by his father, representing another attempt at dynastic succession during the crisis period. His role was mainly ceremonial, while he learned imperial administration, though his brief time in power was entirely consumed by the Gothic crisis that threatened the empire's northern frontiers. His tragic distinction was dying alongside his father at the Battle of Abritus against Gothic invaders, making them the first emperor and heir to fall together in the same battle. Both men had been leading from the front against barbarian forces, showing personal courage that unfortunately couldn't overcome tactical disadvantages or enemy numerical superiority. The double loss represented a devastating blow to Roman morale and military prestige. It was one thing for emperors to be murdered by their own people, but quite another for foreign enemies to kill imperial families in open battle. This defeat marked a psychological turning point where barbarian tribes realized they could actually win against Roman armies, rather than just conducting successful raids. His brief reign illustrated the risks of dynastic succession during military crises. Both father and son died trying to personally restore Roman military reputation, leaving the empire leaderless at exactly the moment when it needed strong leadership most. Their joint deaths would create another succession crisis during ongoing external invasions. The Battle of Abritus would be remembered as the moment barbarian warfare became an existential threat rather than a manageable border problem. And the deaths of Decius and Herennius Etruscus had shown the world that even Roman emperors weren't safe from the chaos that was reshaping the ancient world.
From joint death to plague victim, meet Emperor number 34, Hostilian. This younger son of Decius briefly ruled in 251 CE after surviving the battle that killed his father and brother, only to die from the same plague that was devastating the empire, along with barbarian invasions. Gaius Valens Hostilianus Messius Quintus had stayed in Rome while his father and brother campaigned against the Goths, which turned out to be the smart move when the Battle of Abritus killed both of them. At just 20 years old, he suddenly found himself as the surviving heir to an empire that was falling apart from multiple directions at once. Not exactly the inheritance any young man dreams of. Initially, he shared power with Trebonianus Gallus, who'd assumed control after the military disaster on the Danube. This power-sharing arrangement represented another attempt at combining dynastic legitimacy with military necessity, though both emperors were basically trying to manage a crisis that was bigger than anything the Roman government had faced before. His brief reign was completely dominated by the plague epidemic that had been killing massive numbers of people since the 240s, weakening Roman resistance to barbarian invasions while destroying the tax base needed to fund any kind of military response. Cities were dying, armies were dying, and the imperial treasury was emptying faster than a broken bucket. The plague showed no respect for purple robes or imperial bloodlines. It killed emperors just as efficiently as it killed peasants. His death from disease in 251 CE ended the Decian dynasty after less than 3 years, demonstrating how natural disasters could accomplish what political enemies and foreign armies had failed to achieve. Hostilian's death proved that during periods when everything that could go wrong was going wrong at once, even surviving battles didn't guarantee survival. His death left Trebonianus Gallus as sole emperor, and that guy was about to learn that inheriting a plague-ridden, barbarian-invaded empire wasn't much better than sharing one.
From battle survivor to tribute pair, meet Emperor number 35, Trebonianus Gallus. This general ruled from 251 to 253 CE, attempting to manage multiple crises through diplomacy and bribery that satisfied nobody, while demonstrating just how desperate Roman imperial policy had become. Gaius Hibius Trebonianus Gallus had survived the Battle of Abritus under circumstances that made people whisper. Some folks suspected he'd made a deal with the Goths, or even betrayed Decius and his son to save his own skin. Whether these rumors were true or not, they undermined his legitimacy while he tried to juggle ongoing barbarian invasions, internal rebellions, and plague outbreaks that were killing people faster than he could recruit replacements. His most controversial policy was paying tribute to Gothic tribes to prevent further invasions, basically bribing barbarians to leave Roman territory alone instead of defeating them militarily. This was probably the most realistic solution available, given the empire's weakened condition. But it was politically toxic because Romans expected their emperors to defeat enemies, not write them checks like some kind of ancient protection racket.
The guy faced the same impossible combination of problems that had killed his predecessors. Continued Gothic pressure along the Danube, Persian attacks in the east that drained military resources, renewed plague outbreaks that devastated urban populations, and internal revolts by provincial commanders who thought they could do better. His government could barely respond to one crisis before another one popped up somewhere else. His death in 253 CE came when Aemilianus, sent to defend the Danube frontier, was proclaimed emperor by troops who blamed Gallus for ongoing military humiliations and his embarrassing tribute payments. The brief civil war ended with Gallus's defeat and murder near Rome, along with his son and co-emperor Volusianus. Another imperial family wiped out in the space of an afternoon. Trebonianus Gallus had proven that diplomatic solutions and checkbook foreign policy couldn't overcome fundamental weakness when your own soldiers lose respect for paying enemies instead of fighting them. His death brought another short-lived emperor to power, because apparently nobody had figured out sustainable solutions to the crisis that was slowly killing the empire one disaster at a time.
Joint ruler in continued crisis, meet Emperor number 36, Volusianus. This son of Trebonianus Gallus co-ruled with his father from 251 to 253 CE, sharing in both his controversial policies and his ultimate fate during the ongoing 3rd century disasters. Gaius Vibius Volusianus was proclaimed co-emperor alongside his father, representing another attempt at dynastic succession during impossible circumstances. His youth and inexperience made him completely dependent on his father's guidance throughout their joint reign, though given how that was going, maybe inexperience wasn't the biggest problem they faced. His brief reign was consumed by the same multiple crises that had plagued his father. Gothic invasions that couldn't be stopped militarily, Persian attacks that drained eastern resources, plague outbreaks that killed taxpayers faster than armies, and internal rebellions by commanders who promised better solutions than paying tribute to barbarians. The dynasty's controversial policy of bribing Gothic tribes instead of fighting them defined their entire administration, though this was probably the most realistic response to Roman military weakness. Unfortunately, realistic policies weren't necessarily popular policies, especially when soldiers wanted to fight enemies rather than pay them to go away. His death alongside his father in 253 CE, when Aemilianus's forces defeated them near Rome, marked another dynastic collapse during the crisis period. Both emperors died attempting to maintain power against military rivals who promised more aggressive policies against external enemies, though whether those rivals could actually deliver remained to be seen. The joint deaths of Trebonianus Gallus and Volusianus illustrated how quickly imperial fortunes could change during the 3rd century, from acclamation to death in less than 2 years, with little opportunity to establish effective policies beyond just trying to survive from one crisis to the next.
From frontier commander to ultra-brief usurper, meet Emperor number 37, Aemilianus.
This provincial governor ruled for about 88 days in 253 CE, representing military frustration with civilian attempts to manage barbarian invasions through checkbook diplomacy rather than sword-point negotiation. Marcus Aemilius Aemilianus had been sent by Trebonianus Gallus to defend the Danube frontier against renewed Gothic invasions, where he achieved actual military success against barbarians, rather than just paying them to temporarily leave. His soldiers proclaimed him emperor specifically because he fought enemies instead of negotiating tribute payments like some kind of ancient protection racket. His brief reign was entirely consumed by civil war, first against Trebonianus Gallus and then against Valerian, who was marching toward Rome with yet another army when Aemilianus defeated his first rival. These rapid succession changes showed how quickly military loyalties shifted when multiple generals were competing for imperial power simultaneously. His main campaign promise was aggressive military action against all enemies, rather than the defensive diplomacy that had characterized recent reigns, appealing to soldiers' professional pride and Roman citizens' desire for restored imperial prestige through victory rather than accommodation with barbarians. His death in 253 CE came when his own troops abandoned him for Valerian, whose superior forces and senatorial legitimacy offered better prospects for survival and career advancement. Aemilianus was murdered by his own men rather than facing defeat in battle, proving that Roman soldiers were practical about switching sides when necessary. His ultra-brief reign demonstrated that military success against external enemies meant nothing without broader political support or sustainable resources. Soldiers would follow winners, but only if those winners could actually keep winning against increasingly difficult odds.
From senatorial respectability to unprecedented humiliation, meet Emperor number 38, Valerian. This elderly senator ruled from 253 to 260 CE, attempting to restore imperial dignity through traditional methods before suffering the ultimate disgrace of becoming the first emperor captured alive by foreign enemies. Publius Licinius Valerianus represented the old Roman establishment, trying to govern during the crisis. He brought constitutional legitimacy and decades of administrative experience that previous soldier emperors had lacked. At age 60, his appointment reflected hopes that dignity and competence could overcome the empire's systemic problems through proper management rather than just military force. His smartest decision was appointing his son Gallienus as co-emperor to handle western frontiers while he concentrated on eastern threats, creating a rational division of impossible responsibilities. This power-sharing arrangement worked better than previous attempts because both rulers had clearly defined geographical areas rather than competing for the same territory. The defining disaster was his capture by Persian King Shapur I in 260 CE during negotiations following Roman defeat at the Battle of Edessa. Valerian became the first emperor taken prisoner by foreign enemies, suffering various humiliations, including allegedly being used as a human footstool by the Persian king before dying in captivity. Persian sources claim Shapur had the captured emperor skinned alive and his hide stuffed and displayed in a temple, though this might be propaganda designed to emphasize Roman humiliation. Regardless of the exact details, his capture represented an unprecedented blow to imperial prestige that would echo throughout the ancient world. Valerian's reign proved that traditional methods and constitutional legitimacy couldn't solve third-century problems when the fundamental issue was military weakness against increasingly organized enemies. His capture would leave his son Gallienus to face the empire's worst crisis alone, and things were about to get much worse.
From co-ruler to sole survivor, meet Emperor number 39, Gallienus. This innovative emperor ruled from 253 to 268 CE, initially sharing power with his father, until Valerian's capture left him alone to face the empire's complete disintegration while attempting revolutionary military reforms. Publius Licinius Egnatius Gallienus had initially governed the Western Empire, while his father handled Eastern threats, demonstrating genuine administrative competence during impossible circumstances. When news arrived of his father's capture by Persians, he became sole emperor of what was rapidly becoming a much smaller empire as provinces declared independence left and right. His revolutionary military reforms included creating mobile cavalry forces, recruiting Germanic tribes as federates, and promoting professional soldiers to senatorial rank regardless of their background. Innovations that modernized Roman warfare, but horrified traditional aristocrats who didn't appreciate barbarians getting fancy titles and social advancement. The catastrophic events of his reign included the Gallic Empire's independence under Postumus, Palmyra's Eastern Revolt under Odeodatus, and countless regional usurpations throughout the provinces. By 260 CE, Gallienus controlled little beyond Italy and parts of the Balkans, yet somehow maintained the fiction that he was still emperor of a unified Roman Empire. His death in 268 CE during the siege of Milan came through assassination by his own officers, including future emperor Claudius Gothicus, who blamed him for the empire's fragmentation, despite his innovative attempts to adapt to crisis realities. The conspiracy showed that even competent emperors weren't safe when the empire was falling apart around them. Gallienus had tried to revolutionize Roman military and political systems to meet unprecedented challenges, though his reforms came too late to prevent imperial disintegration. His death would bring Claudius Gothicus to power, and that general was about to show that sometimes what the empire needed was less innovation and more successful killing of barbarians.
From conspiracy member to barbarian slayer, meet Emperor number 40, Claudius Gothicus. This Illyrian soldier ruled from 268 to 270 CE, earning his nickname through decisive victories against Gothic invasions, while beginning the empire's slow recovery from 3rd century chaos. Marcus Aurelius Claudius had participated in the conspiracy that killed Gallienus, representing military leaders who blamed the previous emperor for territorial losses and demanded more aggressive policies against external enemies. His provincial origins from the Balkans reflected the ongoing trend toward provincial leadership. Romans from the frontiers understood barbarian warfare better than aristocrats from Italian cities. His spectacular achievement was the decisive defeat of a massive Gothic confederation at the Battle of Nisus in 269 CE, where Roman forces destroyed an invasion force that ancient sources numbered at over 300,000 warriors. This victory ended Gothic pressure on the Danube frontier for years and began restoring Roman military prestige after decades of defeats. The military success came by combining traditional Roman discipline with innovative tactics using mobile cavalry forces, proving that Gallienus's military reforms could achieve results when properly implemented by competent commanders. Claudius showed that adapted Roman armies could still decisively defeat barbarian confederations when led effectively. His death from plague in 270 CE at Sirmium prevented him from completing the imperial restoration he'd begun, though his brief reign had proven that the empire could still achieve decisive military victories against external enemies when properly organized and commanded. Claudius Gothicus became the model for future Illyrian emperors who would complete Rome's recovery, demonstrating that provincial soldiers could save the empire through personal courage combined with practical military reforms, rather than just traditional methods or political theory.
And that was the story of the 10 Roman emperors for today. If you've enjoyed what you've seen so far, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button, and stay tuned for the next episode of 10 Roman Emperors on our channel, Drowsy Rome.